About no additives. It doesn't use manufacturing additives. In the UK and most of Europe, there's only 2 companies that don't use them for food supplements. But if people understood what these ingredients did, they would not want to take them. I'm talking about things like the fillers, binders, flowing agents, disintegrants, lubricants, and so on. I think I have, I'll show you some of those things later if we have time. Yeah. I don't have the right slides here to show you. That's okay. Sorry about this, guys. I knew we were restricted on time, so. But things like magnesium stearate. You've seen that probably in just about everything. Yeah. Magnesium stearate is not a source of magnesium. But people will have that impression sometimes. But this is an example of one of the common excipients, as we refer to them. Now, magnesium stearate is just one of the types of additives they use, but it's commonly used as a binder and also as a lubricant. Now, if you don't use magnesium stearate, you have significant problems in trying to manufacture a product. That's why it's in 99.999999999% of all products on the market. Now, the problem I have is that, why do people take supplements? They take them for their health. Am I right? You know, so why are we putting in ingredients that are synthetic additives? It's one thing to use synthetic active ingredients. In some cases, you're kind of stuck with things that are lab-produced active ingredients. You know, if you want a particular nutrient in a product that's not a mineral, chances are it's manufactured in a lab. It might be manufactured from a natural source, but it's still done in a laboratory environment. But with inactive ingredients, it doesn't make sense to me at all. It seems to run, you know, counter to what we are putting the product on the market for. But almost every product has them. So the reason why I'm saying that I'm against the use of the additives is not for the reason you expect me to say. It would be very easy for me to get everybody taking Terra Nova products by scaring them and telling them these manufacturing additives are highly toxic, don't use them because they're going to harm you. But I'm not going to say that because I don't believe that that's the truth. Okay? I'm interested in transparency, full disclosure, letting people know exactly what is what. I am not worried about acute toxicity from the kinds of additives you see in supplements. No way. The type that I am very worried about, you don't normally find in supplements. Maybe in some of the cheap ones you get in some of the supermarkets, you know, the pharmaceutically produced ones by those big companies on the European continent and so on. But the reality is that in most cases, the amount that you're going to be consuming from those additives should not cause anybody any harm, unless they're highly sensitive to them. But there is a more practical issue about this. Using magnesium stearate as an example, I want to use that one not because it's easy to pick on it, but because it's in almost every product in the world, in almost every supplement. If you make tablets, you have to use these additives. That's why there's no Terra Nova product in tablet. If you make a capsule, you don't ever need them. But it's still in 99% of all capsules. But magnesium stearate, the thing that's interesting about that additive is that it's used by the drugs industry a lot. But one of the main reasons why it's used in the drug industry is actually as something that delays the dissolution of certain active ingredients. With some drugs, as you know, you don't want them to release in a certain part of the gut. You need them to release in a different part. Okay? So they will often use magnesium stearate in order to delay the release of those active ingredients into solution. But remember, if an active ingredient doesn't ever get into solution, it can't work. But with certain drugs, it's necessary. Totally legitimate. But with a food supplement, the last thing in the world you would ever want to do is delay the dissolution of an active ingredient. Especially when you think, let's say, you know, if you're going to take a multivitamin, Multivitamins obviously will have certain trace minerals in it, like manganese and copper, iron, zinc, things like this. But the absorption sites for these trace minerals is the first 12 inches of the small intestine, just past the stomach. But if you take a multivitamin which will be heavily laden with magnesium stearate, and chances are that will be the case, then you are taking an ingredient that you know, or that is known, to delay the dissolution of active ingredients. Now, if it delays the dissolution of the trace minerals in that product, the iron, the manganese, the copper, zinc, and so on, those nutrients can't crawl their way back up the intestine to get to their absorption sites. So they ain't going to be absorbed. Now, I don't think ever that there's going to be enough magnesium stearate in a product to eliminate the ability to absorb the trace minerals in that product. There's no way in the world I think that would happen. But even if it's 1% reduction, that's 1% too many. But I have a feeling it would be significantly more than that. But for me, it doesn't matter. I don't need to know whether it's 1 or 100%. I just need to know that it doesn't belong there. Because I do not want any interference with absorption, bioavailability, utilization, metabolic activation, distribution, and so on, blah, 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 blah. I'm trying to achieve an ideal situation. I cannot do it by adding those kinds of ingredients because I can almost be certain that they are going to interfere with synergy at some level or another. And usually, with things like magnesium stearate, it'll affect it on the first layer of synergy, which is the uptake of the nutrient. But other ingredients within the products may well affect it later on. In order to achieve perfect synergy, or as close as you can get to that, because I'll never get there, you need also purity. And if you want purity, you can't gain purity by adding additives to the product. So it just didn't make sense. However, people kind of wonder, well, why do you add these ingredients to the products in the first place? Why would anybody add them? Well, about this dissolution thing, I don't think most people know about it. But people use the additives because it makes manufacturing fast. Okay? And what do you think that means in reality? If you make it faster,
more profit.
Yes, you make it cheaper. Yeah, you get more profit. When a supplement company goes to a manufacturer and says, "This is my formulation. I want you to make this," they say, "Give me a price." Say, "Okay, I'll give you a price," and they give you a price per 1,000 capsules usually. And so then you finally, you haggle and you beat them over the head and all that, and then you agree on a price. But then that manufacturer has it in his mind. This is the price that I have given to this supplement marketer. So I am going to make this product, but the faster that I make it, the less machinery time, the less technician time that I have. I pay the technicians less, or they can work on somebody else's product after that because I can get it done just like that. You put it on the high-speed machines, and you make a lot more profit. But stupid me goes to the manufacturers and tells them, I have these formulations, and they're really, really bizarre formulations. And they said, "Okay, well, no, we can do that." I said, "But you can't use any manufacturing additives." They all ran away screaming in the other direction. We went to so many different manufacturers on the continent as well as in the UK, and none of them wanted to touch it. They said all of these scary stories would happen if we tried to do this. And they said even if you found somebody who was stupid enough to do it, it would be so expensive for them to actually adopt the necessary means to do it, and you'll never be able to put the product on the market because of the cost. But me being an idiot, I said, "Well, okay, thank you," and move on to somebody else. Finally, after months of trying, we found a manufacturer that looked at this and said, "Well, I really respect the sincerity of what you're trying to do, but I don't know if it's actually possible." But he knew of my background, so he said, "Look, if you trust me enough to give me enough enough raw materials to do test batches, then I'll trust you enough to give you machinery and technician time. We'll see if it can work." And he wasn't getting paid for this, so he took a real risk. And so he started the process of trying to make Terra Nova formulations without manufacturing additives. Now, it took about 4 months maybe before he successfully did it. And he also knew, which all the other ones knew, I think, we were having a third-party lab do testing on it to make sure that they were doing it right. So you couldn't say, yeah, we've done it, yay, yay, and then not do it right. So what he didn't know at the time is we were using 2 labs. Because I'm OC, obsessive compulsive, so I was worried that I needed to have an additional check on this. So, but it took that long, and all the scary stories that these other manufacturers said would happen, they did. Okay? Every single one of them. But there were certain things that nobody wanted to put into practice because it was very expensive to do. But finally, we ended up having to do for certain products. Some of the products, one of them in particular, took 4 times longer to make than if we had let them use excipients. Now, it takes 1 day to weigh this particular product up. It takes 1 day to manufacture 50,000 capsules only. Whenever they make that product for us, they have to make 250,000 at least just to meet my very basic short-term needs for that product. It's a whole week to make 1 batch of 1 product. And there's 49 other products in the range. So this is something that I obviously have to pay for. But it's something that doesn't, oddly enough, get reflected in the cost of the product at a retail level. Okay? But I will not budge on this. And it was even harder with Terranova because the vast majority of the weight of our product is botanical and food-oriented, and those ingredients are notoriously reactive. If you just have vitamins and minerals and things like that, you can make those without excipients and it doesn't cause too much problem. But with these formulations, it's terrible. It is terrible. Nothing flows right. Things are very sticky, especially freeze-dried plants. The only thing that's missing is the moisture. So all of, like some ingredients are very high in naturally occurring fat content. Like acai berry or sea buckthorn fruit or something like that. And you cannot use these ingredients. They're terrible to work with. But what the manufacturers had to do is use some of the active ingredients as kind of pseudo-excipients based on when they actually blended into the formulation and so on. And nothing works right. And most importantly, they can't run it on the high-speed machines. They have to do it on these semi-automatic machines that basically are done more by hand. And it takes so much longer. But the end result is that you have intensely synergistic formulations that have a built-in balance and gentleness, even though their potency and effectiveness tends to be much higher than what you're accustomed to. Usually we think more potency, less gentleness. In the case of Terranova, because of the way the synergy works, and the way that I obsess about the formulation approach, you actually get the gentleness with the potency, and probably more gentleness because of that, strangely enough. But one of the reasons why is because these additives aren't everywhere. They guarantee that you're going to get the active ingredients in your system faster because you just have a vegetarian capsule that breaks down in just moisture. You don't need acid in your stomach to break down a vegetarian capsule. And then there's nothing to compete with. No magnesium stearate, no dicalcium phosphate, no silicon dioxide, no hydrogenated fat, and so on and so forth. But it makes a huge difference in the effect of the product. Okay. Questions?
Capsules,
Yes.
what are they made of?
They're vegetable cellulose. It's referred to generically as HPMC or propylmethylcellulose, which is basically, it's derived originally from conifer trees normally, but it's obviously it's purified, so it's not like you get pine derivatives in it. But yeah, that's almost all vegetarian capsules are that. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Now, I've really gone fast, much faster than I would have normally done. But I wanted to show you a couple of things, though. This is the... One day, maybe you guys will go here with me. This is the farm in Oregon where the plants are grown that we use. The vast majority of plants. This is only the small part of it. This is actually the eclectic farm in Oregon, in the northwest of the United States. The man who founded this farm, started the farm, he was a pioneer. He was the first person in the world to ever do freeze drying of commercial botanicals, and he's a proper, 1960s kind of mentality, but very laid back, but very holistically driven. But he's also a pharmacist by training as well, and he was one of the first naturopathic physicians in the United States. But he started this farm, more than 30 years ago. But the important thing about this farm is it's not only the way that they grow things, but the fact that they are so completely cocooned and protected from any exposure to anything else. This is a certified organic farm, and I remember when I went there the first time, when you get to this farm, you have to drive down, and then you can't drive anymore. You have to walk down this very treacherous pathway. And I remember walking down with Ed, the founder, and he noticed I was looking to the right on this path on the way down, because it looked like they were cultivating plants, but in this wild atmosphere. He said, "Oh, that's black cohosh." I said, "Oh, okay." But he said it as though that was actually a plant that he was cultivating there. And I said, "Ed, don't you have flat fields?" He said, yeah, I have those, but this plant likes to grow here. And I had known from my studying of Chinese medicine before that there are different energetic properties to plants when they're grown in certain places, but also knew that there's different chemistry to plants when they're grown in different environments as well. But what he has done is he's created this amalgamation of partly flat fields where that's the only way you can practically do it, but also allowing a lot of the plants to grow in their wild environment, but still within that organic cultivation. And he will, the other thing that's important for me is that he will not harvest a plant until it reaches its maximum biochemical peak for different types of markers within that plant. And because he has full-scale analytical capabilities too, a full lab, he's able to validate that as well. But it's the intimate relationship that he and the other people who work on the farm have with the plants that is just stunning. I mean, he's proper. And this is him with his son, actually. They started him early there. This is some of the calendula fields, partly. This is a dandelion harvest there that they're doing. Wherever you can't grow a plant, there's a couple of plants within Terra Nova products that they can't grow in Oregon for obvious climate reasons. This is one of Ed's friends' farms in Hawaii. This is an organic farm as well. They're actually, this is where the ginger and the turmeric come from. You can see the turmeric harvest there. So, but what happens then is the plants will be flash frozen, and because of the fact that with his farm, he knew that the importance was to flash freeze the plant very, very quickly after harvest. He built his facility for the cold storage very, very close to his farm so that there wasn't a long delay between the harvest and when they would actually be stabilized. And then when the plants are freeze-dried, you retain, like I said, you retain virtually 100% of the original chemistry of that plant. You retain the enzymes, you retain everything that you're trying to retain from it. And it just makes the plants unbelievably powerful. But at the same time, they're balanced and gentle because you haven't removed anything from it. This is the other thing that I wanted to talk about for a second before we finish, because I know you guys need to get back, is that you will note within Terra Nova, we don't use extracts. Except for one plant, which has its own separate story behind it. It's just the rhodiola, which is a warm water, freeze-dried extract. But in all of the other plant ingredients, we use whole, unadulterated plants. If anybody ever tells you that's the active chemical in that plant, it's not. Every chemical in every plant is active. They just have different properties. If you show me an active chemical in a plant, I will show you 20 other chemicals in that plant that are needed in order for that so-called active chemical to work. It might be a carrier or a metabolizing agent. It might be a synergist for that. It might even be a counterbalancing chemical or an antidote to the toxicity of that plant. We have so many studies that have been performed that show that whole plants actually are more effective in certain properties than the isolated chemical from that plant. But also we have examples where, lots of examples, where the toxicity of particular plant chemicals, which are not toxic in the plant itself, become toxic because they are taken out in isolation. That's why we don't have, kava kava on the market. It wasn't because there's anything wrong with kava kava or because it's dangerous. It's because some company, I think in Germany, decided, well, we're going to up the level of this isolated cavalactone from kava kava to a level that was unnaturally high, and it became toxic to the liver. But in Polynesia, they take kava kava in huge amounts in their ceremonies, much higher than the level in that product that caused the liver damage. But they don't get liver damage. It's because they take it within the context of the whole plant. And so the whole plant has these counterbalancing antidote chemicals in it. These are all part of the built-in gentleness and balance that I want to have, and using the whole plant instead of the extract provides this. But it also doesn't necessarily reduce the effectiveness of the plant either. If you're using something as an acute medicine for some kind of condition, there might be times when you do want to use a standardized extract, but in most cases, I don't find that that's necessary, and I often find that the effect and definitely the gentleness and lack of side effects is very evident with freeze-dried plants versus the extracts. Extraction is great for concentrating certain chemicals in a plant, but it doesn't concentrate the plant. Only certain chemicals that are able to be concentrated by that solvent that's used. And standardized extracts, almost invariably, quite a number of them anyway, will use toxic solvents like methanol, acetone, hexane, in order to extract it, and you'll still be left with some tiny residue of those solvents in there. The Terra Nova products, we just don't, there's no solvents involved. Even with the rhodiola that is an extract, it's just warm water extraction, so you don't get any residues that are left from that either. So purity, 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 purity. Okay? So anyway, that's a very, 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 very fast version of Terra Nova. There's so much more I could cover, but I just wanted to give you an overview of some of the main issues. So, any questions before we let you get back to your...
Why do you use extract with the rhodiola? What's the reason?
Okay. It's an unusual situation. Rhodiola doesn't grow in Oregon, and Ed had told me, Ed, the farmer we were talking about, he told me about this himself. I had wanted to use rhodiola that he would recommend, and he said, look, he told me about this raw material that came from that was being made in Europe that was quite interesting to him because it was the only freeze-dried extract he had ever seen. And because he was the pioneer of freeze-drying, commercial botanicals, this was quite significant to him. But it turns out that the person who did all of the original research on rhodiola, his name is Zakir Ramazanov. He was actually a friend of my co-technical director at Solgar. In fact, he wrote a book with this technical director from the American Solgar when I was technical director in the UK. And Ramazanov was the forefather, the grandfather of all rhodiola research. All that we know about rhodiola, we know of mainly because of him. But what we didn't know at the time, I remember in 1995, Solgar were the first company to launch rhodiola on the market. And I was very much involved in that launch. And I was so excited about this plant. But what we didn't know is that Ramazanov had actually put together his own protocol for producing rhodiola for these clinical trials that he was doing. And what he had been doing is he had been creating an extract. For one thing, it involved a gentler, non-toxic extract, for one thing. But also what was very important to him is that he knew that the chemistry of what was so important to retain in the rhodiola extract needed to be preserved, and so he freeze-dried it. Nobody had ever heard of such a thing before. And Ed was the only one freeze-drying medicinal plants anyway, but he was freeze-drying them not as extracts. But Ramazanov had this done, and he founded this company, believe it or not, in the Canary Islands. He was getting his rhodiola from Siberia and bringing it to the Canary Islands. He was creating this aqueous extract. I think he also did some ethanol, but we use just an aqueous extract. And he was then freeze-drying this extract. But because this was the form that was actually being used in the clinical trials, that's why I wanted to use it. Because no, you couldn't get it otherwise. And this was providing that same kind of clinical potency that we had from the research, but in a clean, solvent-free, no residue, solvent residues, and it was employing the technology of freeze drying. And so I chose to use that within the formulations. And let's face it, it's incredibly powerful, but it all at the same time, again, incredibly gentle. So that's why I made the exception in that case. And but the thing is that in '95 and from then on, all of the products that hit the market, or virtually all of them, except for the ones that were created by his company, they were all the same old methanolic toxic solvent extracts. Some of them probably weren't using toxic solvents, but they were not the same thing as what was used in the research. So here we had an opportunity to adhere to our own principles about the advantages of freeze drying, but at the same time use the very ingredient that is produced by the company that he founded in the first place. So that's why we made the exception in that case. It's kind of a weird story, but it makes a difference. Okay, anything else? Has this at all been helpful to you?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank goodness. I'm so excited to get a chance. I think we'll be going out later to visit some of the stores, which would be fantastic. I'm particularly excited because Heilsu has been, even the short time that I've known them, they're amazing. So thank you, Gunther, for originally contacting me. And with Haftis for all of your wonderful support with everything, and Sigrid for
picking you up this morning.
For picking me up. I was going to say for your amazing leadership. And thank you for putting up with me for all this time. And thank you for your support to Terra Nova. And thank you for all of your educational work for the brand too. So I look forward to seeing all of you very soon. And I'll be back, I think I'll be back in August anyway to see you again for something on a broader scale. And some of you I'll see in a little while. So see you soon.